The immaterial quest of mankind knows two main objectives. First, the religious road towards a personal god or goddess or godlike principle in the outside world. And second, the spiritual path towards an innate divine presence which pervades everything. Gnosis is about the second, inner alternative. One of the oldest representatives of Gnosis is the philosophy of Non-Dualism, a monism called Advaita Vedanta, according to Shankaracharya, an Indian philosopher and Gnostic. He says, there is nothing but spirit, which he calls tat. Everything else is an illusion. That means when we observe the outside world, we perceive something illusionary and then interpret it. We name it. Friedrich Nietzsche says, there are no facts, only interpretations. The moment we name a form and attach attributes to it, we create an illusionary world. In other words, we leave the unity, oneness of Tat and enter the diversity of the created multiverse. In the beginningless beginning, spirit, soul, Tat is untouched and rests in eternity. However, this resting Tat is not conscious of itself. Out of a whim, lahar in Sanskrit, it creates the tangible, however illusionary world, man, women inclusive. This is a continuous, everlasting creation on the level of the quantum world. Man, woman are the foremost vehicle to evolutionarily raise the consciousness of Tat through their enlightenment and ascension. The world of diversity always rests in unity, but is the required mirror for the unity to watch itself. With the emanation of diversity, immediately perception is present. Without emanation, there is nobody to perceive and nothing to be perceived. The perceiver, that which can be perceived, and the action that follows perception are one before emanation, says Parvati Kumar. In this scenario, there is no personal God with qualities. Such a so-called God would belong to the created world of illusion. Man created his gods in his own image. These goddesses and gods are fictitious. They are either a myth, for example the sun, or an entity only interpreted as God, for example a natural spirit or an alien. In this opening of the oneness of Tat into diversity, also the dual principle of male and female arises. In this concept, the female is kind of primary, because it is the womb of the world. Parvati Kumar says the first emanation of Tat is she, the mother of the world. He is in she, man is in woman, Adam is in Madam. Or as Goethe put it, the eternal feminine draws us on high. The Gnostic God is not in churches, synagogues, mosques, temple, etc. The God of religions serves only the exercise of power. This so-called God or goddess is always outside of man. Only then can he or she be abused to exercise power. Why is the exercise of power so easy for the religious and political rulers? Because people identify with their acquired conditioned personality instead of with their soul. You as soul are the screen. The personality is constantly distracted by the film of life displayed on the screen. Tat, soul, screen represent being. Personality stands for becoming, the spiritual evolution. We are only busy with the programs we create ourselves, instead of identifying ourselves with what remains when the programs are over. The soul, the screen. In deep sleep we are unconsciously on the move as a soul. When we wake up, we want to experience something. We become entangled in so many programs. These run all subconsciously. We are absorbed by them. We become the chameleon that changes its body color depending on the environment. We become what surrounds us. In other words, we become easily and fully influenced, persuaded, manipulated, subconsciously automated. The many programs are so exciting that we don't even notice the screen. Because we're so distracted, the powers can seduce us so easily. This is how people are kept, as in mass animal husbandry. Even if the cage door is opened, they stay inside for alleged security reasons. Man is not what he or she believes. Man is what remains when the interpreted, the illusion of form, is gone. God, Spirit, is within you, living in your heart, flowing through all that is. You are Tat, that, Spirit, the formless God. There is an omnipresent, eternal, boundless and immutable principle on which all speculations are impossible, since it transcends the power of human conception and could only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. It is beyond the range and reach of thought. In the words of Mandukya in the Upanishads, it is unthinkable and unspeakable. It is also called the One, about whom naught may or can be said, as Alice Bailey put it. This principle is an absolute reality that precedes all manifested limited being. This infinite and eternal cause is the rootless root of all that has been and ever will be. Max Planck says, "There is no matter as such. There is only the invigorating, invisible, immortal spirit as the source of matter, which I call God." I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness. What is then Gnosis? The realization that God or Spirit is the essence of every human being, and that it does not have to be studied outside with the help of religions and clergy, represents the core of what is called Gnosis. The term Gnosis is of Greek origin and means knowledge, insight, inspiration. It refers to a transcendental knowledge of man about his origin and the secrets of the universe. It is an enlightening, liberating knowledge that frees the person from ignorance. Knowledge instead of faith. The Gnostic recognizes himself and thus the universe as God Spirit. The inscription at the temple of the oracle in Delphi refers to this knowledge, nosce te ipsum, gnothi seauton. Man, recognize yourself, and you will know the universe and God's Spirit. In her well-known book, The Gnostic Gospels, the famous religious scientist ELAINE Pagels writes, "To know oneself means to know God. This is the secret of Gnosis." Gnosis existed secretly in all ancient cultures of the world. Among the Druids, in Persia, in ancient Mexico, in Peru, India, Egypt, Tibet, and many other countries. The ways of Gnosis were taught secretly because they were always in contradiction to the publicly practiced religions, which are all about the exercise of power. Gnosis is the natural result of an awakening consciousness, a philosophia per ennis et universalis, a universal philosophy not tied to any time or author, about which Osho has often spoken. Osho, alias Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, is the best-known Gnostic at present. He has brought millions of seekers on the King's Gnostic road of enlightenment and ascension. Gnosis is a synthetic self-knowledge. This universal knowledge, essential knowledge, is not acquired. It is based on one's own deep inner knowing and can therefore be expressed in everyday life because correct decisions are made intuitively, which means through the voice of the soul, the I Am presence. The insights of the individual are essentially the same as those of all Gnostics. They are tangible when expressed and communicated with words. For outsiders, this is only learned book knowledge that can, however, inspire their own search. Gnosticism differs from mysticism in the following way. Mystic experiences cannot be communicated in a fully comprehensible way. Gnostic knowledge arises in the heart in an intuitive way. It is also called the wisdom of the heart. Mystics seek union with the divine. Gnostics additionally want to understand the divine. Pythagoras was a Gnostic. So was Plato and Socrates. Master Eckhart was a mystic. So was Francis of Assisi, Hildegard of Bingen, etc. The Sufis are known as Islamic mystics. Their tradition is, however, much older. Most famous are Hafiz and Jalaluddin Rumi from Iran. The Jewish mystics and Gnostics are connected to the Kabbalah and to Hasidism. Indian mystics and Gnostics, besides Shankaracharya, are, for example, Shirdi Sai Baba, Yogananda, Krishnamurti, Meher Baba, Osho, to name only a few. A very important Greek Gnostic philosopher is the Neoplatonist Plotin. Plotinus taught that there was a supreme, totally transcended One, containing no division, multiplicity, or distinction, beyond all categories of being and non-being. This One cannot be any existing thing, nor is it merely the sum of all things, but is prior to all things. Plotinus identified his One with the concept of good and the principle of beauty. The monistic concept fits very well to the teachings of Madame Blavatsky quoted above. The spiritual yearning of all souls is a natural birthright. It is within, soul-inspired, and manifests its sublime effects when we engage in silent meditation or prayer. Some call it intuition, heartfelt emotions, or feelings of intense and inspired transcendence. We observe it in the embrace of a loved one, a child's laughter, the painful and sorrow-laden memory of an unexpected loved one's loss or premature death. A tender and tearful prayer for one's recovery and welfare when subjected to life-threatening events. The joy we feel when an existential fear is overcome through trial and courageous endurance. And a sunset spreading its glory across a field of flowers, as Patrick Amoroso put it. What do these painful and blissful situations have in common? In both of them, wishful thinking can be suspended in the blink of an eye, and intuition can come through. On the Gnostic way, one cannot enhance the heavenly bank account by good deeds or by following the 10 Commandments. There is also no one who redeems one from supposed sins. The Gnostic is fully responsible for him or herself, and therefore not accountable to anyone. She lives freely, independent of society, and is therefore a bad consumer. All this is suspicious to the state as well as to religions. Therefore, Gnostics often have to live condemned as heretics. For these people, as Carl Gustav Jung puts it, theology and ethics are only stepping stones on the way to self-knowledge. They have no essential intrinsic value. For Gnostics, there are no holy or even divine scriptures. The single adventure worth living for the modern man can only be found within. This is how the Gnostic lives his everyday life. He observes events from different perspectives. He experiences himself as a spectator watching the big stage from a distance, preferably from the eagle's position. He sees the actors playing their roles with all the consequences as genuine as if it were reality. And then he notices at times how he gets angry with himself because he has identified himself with his role. But an actor always remains the actor. He is never the role. However, he is not only an actor as well as an observer, but also a designer and creator. He knows only the intention counts, nothing is lost, there are no sins. On planet Earth, we experience with all our senses by grasping. Gnostics have been vehemently persecuted in Europe since Constantine I. The last major persecution ended in 1244 with the burning of hundreds of Cathars in the castle of Montségur in France. The persecution of the first original Christians, Manichaeans, Paulicians, Bogomils, Cathars, persecuted by Roman Catholicism. How can this be explained? The Gnostics know something the rulers never wanted to make public. No human being can realize his or her true self by being what society expects him or her to be, nor by doing what is required by law. Political and patriotic bonds, as well as moral and ethic rules and commandments, do not contribute to the spiritual well-being of the human soul. Quite the opposite. They are distractions that keep us as souls away from our true spiritual destiny. Man grows best and fastest when he can grasp matter and experience life as freely as possible. The exercise of power through superordinate instances is only a hindrance. This characteristic trait of Gnosticism was in earlier times regarded as heretical and is still today often called world-denying and hostile to life. Nothing could be more wrong. If we want to attain Gnosis, the wisdom of the heart, that frees us, we must liberate ourselves from the false cosmos that our conditioned mind creates for us. The Greek word cosmos expresses this idea. What we perceive results from our own interpretations. When Emperor Constantine I, in determining the content of the New Testament, ordered to select out of thousands of existing writings those which were termed canonical, the supreme rule was that those treatises which taught the Gnostic way should be forbidden. These so-called apocryphal writings were nowadays rediscovered in the manuscript of the Dead Sea in Nag Hammadi and Qumran. The original Christians were Gnostics, as was Jesus, alias Apollonius of Tyana. The life of Jesus in the New Testament has nothing to do with the life of a historical person of the same name. It is the usual curriculum vitae of gods of many religions, for example Mithras alias Sol Invictus, the invincible sun, or Horus in Egypt, or Krishna in India. It is a myth, the way of the sun through the zodiac, as D.M. Murdoch and many other researchers have proven. Constantine I founded another solar religion, a sun cult, respectively. The teaching of the New Testament is that God must be sought in the outside. The old man with the beard from the Old Testament, the jealous God who didn't want to see any other gods next to him. Yahweh, the Anunnaki Enki and his son Marduk from the Old Testament was in the New Testament confirmed as God the Father. The Roman Catholic Church is a successor organization of the old Roman Empire. Both are pure power structures. The true Gnostic doctrine of Jesus alias Apollonius of Tyana was condemned. Gnosis has no place in the Roman Catholic Church. Gnostics do not let the powerful seduce them. The agenda of the Abrahamic religions consists of ecclesiastical hierarchies, complemented by a sacerdotal concentration of power for male-dominated priestly control. It does not matter whether such roles are termed ministers, deacons, priests, presbyters, elders, reverends, rabbis, or imams. Essentially, these are exclusively male-dominated power positions that all perform the same intercessor role between one's allegedly inherent sinful, guilty state and the divine, as Patrick Amoroso puts it. Thus, the supposedly sinful, guilty believer gets to a fateful dependence. Misuse of power is easily possible and was the rule until today, beginning in ancient Babylon. The divine is man's very own inner essence. The position of a facilitator or mediator is totally absurd. The priesthood goes back to Anu, father of Enlil and Enki, in connection with the sun god Shamash. Anu appointed Melchizedek. Abraham serves Melchizedek. Moses' elder brother Aaron founded the Levitical Jewish priesthood of the Kohanim. Since then, priests have been lying to and dominating humanity. Some of them may not be aware of it and try to comfort their parish, but this is also a barrier to the inner own divinity. The masses are never militaristic until their minds are poisoned by propaganda, says Albert Einstein. Priests were responsible for the temple service. Pharisees, the rabbis, for the content of the teaching. In the New Testament, Jesus is called a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. The real Jesus, alias Apollonius, however, was not a priest, but an enlightened Gnostic. In practice, the Pope, as Pontifex Maximus, is the successor of the Jewish high priest and the Roman emperor. The priesthood has again the typical mediating function. The Pope calls himself the representative of God on earth. There are still these partially hidden elites, also called cabal, determined to prevent the awakening of humanity. The entire spectrum of political, military, financial and priestly power elites who fulfill the commandment of their hidden masters and are still trying to unleash their new world dictatorship. Pink Floyd says, "We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teachers, leave them kids alone. Hey, teachers, leave them kids alone." Gnostics as well as mystics are neither seduced by worldly nor by religious politicians. If they work as counselors, teachers, or healers, they do this on their own accountability. They are not committed to any religious tradition and have neither inherited their vocation nor been ordained. They do not act as mediators, but give their friends advice if asked for. They point the way to personal responsibility and self-awareness and have no intention in exercising power. These Gnostics have existed at all times. Many of them have worked in secrecy. If they were known and loved by the people, they were often abused by the rulers. As soon as the truth becomes too widespread, the powerful intervene and falsify it in their favor. Some of these wise men and women were the guardians of the ancient secrets of true human history. Many of these truths are now coming to light. It is the time of the great enlightenment and revelation, also known as apocalypse. The scientific findings of Dr. Georgy Stankov, who in 1997, by discovering the universal law of mathematics and physics, put mathematics and physics on a truly holistic basis for the first time. The new physical and mathematical axiomatics of the universal law is derived from human consciousness and scientifically explained. All physical quantities, natural constants, and known physical laws are derived from the primary term of human consciousness. Space-time is energy, is all that is. The universal law is nothing else but a mathematical, scientific explanation of the Gnostic discoveries every human being is capable of attaining. As such, it is the base for the spirituality of the Aquarian Age on the new upper 4D and 5D worlds of planetary perception, also called timelines. The universal law has a long history and was well known in Lemuria and Atlantis, but then got lost on the 3D prison planet Earth, which is now abandoned by the majority of the Earth's population. Georgy Stankov speaks of the new Gnosis and calls the universal law the guidelines of ascension and the light body process, through which many people currently are going. Imagine that the planet that you are now living on is one that has a consciousness constituting a living, breathing soul, and is now attempting to let humanity realize the extent to which its habitation is at risk precisely due to its egregious avarice, vulgar war-making propensity, and the never-ending plunder of the earth's bountiful resources. Furthermore, it is in close communication and alignment with its benefactor of life-giving light, our Sun, and at this very moment is ascending into a higher dimensional realm and merging into a new golden galaxy, where only beauty, compassion, creativity, understanding and love for all that lives and breathes will be the existential and transcending experience for all, the fifth density. Additionally, there are beings on earth right now who are spiritually and energetically fomenting this change and have for many years endured trials at the societal, physical and spiritual levels of immense emotional transcendence and personal tribulation. Who are they? It is not a privileged club, but is identified by those who allow their heart and soul to speak to them in silent prayer or meditation. The Gnostics. Quote Patrick Amoroso. The awakened, although few in number now, but ever increasing, are maneuvering into the greatest spiritual evolution and uplift of human consciousness in the annals of human history. When humanity is able to transcend the chains of being domiciled to the nation of one's birth, and awakens to the level of a benevolent, earth-aligned consciousness, where natural, racial and class distinctions currently held in concert with divisively accepted religious testaments are no longer undermining the innate and intuitive goodness of mankind's potential, then and only then will we ascend to a spiritually based humanitarian brotherhood and sisterhood, and thus begin to traverse the path as being with a divine purpose in a universe of unlimited love for all that lives. Spiritually advanced souls and light bearers from across the ages are uniting at this very moment in one final task of gathering cosmic and source energies to ascend the planet Gaia into a new golden age of harmony, creativity, and universal oneness. Ultimately, this long-awaited realization will return our home planet Earth to a brotherhood and sisterhood of unification, both at the individual, galactic, and soul level, extending to the unlimited reaches of a world community of divinely inspired togetherness, as Patrick Amoroso put it. It is happening now. The divine will aspect of the soul in all of us has awakened. We are the ones that we have been waiting for.